by COVID-19, and we know how difficult this time is. So hopefully this will be a nice reprieve for everybody, and we can do some education and some collaborating and just learn how to move together towards some good outcomes in the environmental field. So today's webinar, again, is on electric vehicles and on beneficial electrification across the state. It's a really important time to be talking about electric vehicles, or EVs, as many people in the field call them. We see that transportation as an industry represents one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions across the country and in the state of Illinois. It contributes to climate change, and the emissions also have really strong localized effects on disenfranchised communities and communities of color. And this has big environmental justice implications. So EVs touch on global issues and on local issues, and also on local and global economic systems as well. We see major transitions from automakers who are creating passenger vehicles, light duty and heavy duty vehicles, and freight vehicles as well. So there are these major economic shifts that are going on, which is why this is a really exciting time to talk about this. And we've brought in some really amazing experts who I'm going to introduce in a moment, who will help us sift through all of this. And we're really excited to bring them on to talk to everybody about what the state of the industry is and where we are right now and where we're going to move toward. So to kick it off, I'm going to start by introducing Brian Urbaszewski. I got it right? Excellent. Okay. He's the director of environmental health programs for Respiratory Health Association since 1998. He promotes clean air in Illinois and metropolitan Chicago through public policy advocacy and public education. He has successfully worked to enact and implement local, state, and national air quality policies and legislation covering coal power plant emissions, diesel and gasoline vehicle emission standards, national air quality health standards, as well as air pollution education and awareness campaigns aimed at promoting clean, renewable energy and zero emission vehicles. He is a regular resource for local media on environmental health issues, especially the effects of air pollution on people with asthma and COPD. He serves on the board of the Illinois Environmental Council, a statewide organization that acts as the eyes, ears, and voice of the environmental community. And we also have Marta Keane on. Marta Keane is the recycling specialist for Will County with over 30 years of experience in the solid waste industry, a past president of the Illinois Recycling Association and current chair of the Illinois Product Stewardship Council. She's been involved in energy issues since 2010 and helped write the county's energy conservation plan. Currently, she's working to convince elected officials to install EV charging stations in public parking lots, which is an essential fight, and we appreciate you doing that. So we're going to start off with Marta. And just a note, again, we'll be taking questions at the end. So we're going to have Marta present, Brian present, and then we'll do questions. So thank you all. And Marta, do you want to kick us off?
Sorry, Marta, one quick form before I throw it to you. For folks, Marta's going to be using a presentation. So if you'd like to see Marta side by side with her presentation, you can click the speaker view, which is at the top right corner of your Zoom screen. It's kind of like two parallel boxes stacked on top of each other, so it just makes viewing the presentation a little nicer. Marta, with that, thank you.
All right, can everybody see that? Can you hear me?
I can see it, I can hear you.
Yep.
Excellent.
And in the chat box, yeah, we're seeing yeses.
All right, thanks guys. All right, so this is my first time and it's very exciting, new technology for me. And just so you know, we're gonna run through just what the EV basics are, what a level 1 charging station is, how you can look at adopting a level 2. We're going to touch on level 3s and what they are, and give you some reasons why you'd want to install them. So the very basics of electric vehicles, or EVs, is that they have batteries in them that are charged by plugging the car into an electric outlet. And hybrid electric vehicles can have both batteries as well as a gasoline engine. There are also vehicles that are hybrids that are out there since the very early 2000s. Think of a Prius. And a lot of folks think they're electric vehicles because they're hybrids, and they are battery operated, but not by plugging in. And so they are not the same as an EV. They don't require to be plugged in. They, like all EVs, get a lot of power from the engine as well as from the braking system, which is called regenerative braking, and actually captures energy that you lose when you're slowing your car down, which is really cool. So every car manufacturer at this point is making electric vehicles, every single one. Not in every single model, but they are making them. And some of them are ubiquitous. You wouldn't even know it was an EV. So you've got those. Nearly all of them can be plugged into a standard outlet. So just like you have at home, you could plug it in and it would charge. It would take about 9 hours to charge, and the average cost for doing that would be about 80 cents. For government entities, the reason I have a price up there is we have group purchasing in Will County, and that gives us discounted pricing. So if we were to switch to an electric vehicle fleet, or if we were to encourage our employees to use electric vehicles, the cost for us would be only 30 cents. And most EV users will rely on home charging. There is legislation under consideration right now to actually require all multifamily buildings and those undergoing significant reconstruction to actually install 30% capacity for EVs in their parking garaging structures. So certainly it's coming. Now, EV owners can choose to add a 240-volt adapter in order to make the charging experience faster. Now, think of if you were to add a hot tub to your house, then that would be the same thing. You would need a 240 line for that. So sometimes that requires an electrician, but it's really inexpensive to do, and it can be under $1,000 pretty easily for the average homeowner to put this in. That's going to actually make your car charge in as little as 3 hours. And the average cost for that is going to be $1.59 because you are pulling more electricity. There are also faster charging stations. These are 360 volts and greater. These are considered level 3 stations. They can charge an electric vehicle in less than 30 minutes. So just kind of the basics. If you've never had one, you're considering getting one, or you just wonder what people that have them are doing. They would purchase or lease the EV. They would charge it at home on a standard 110 outlet. Then if they're really lucky, maybe they could drive it to work and plug back in, get a little additional distance there, and plug it in at their place of employment. And then the other thing that they might do is when they go shopping, they might go to stores, the mall, the movie theater, or a park, and they would want to plug it in there again so that they have that additional ability to go somewhere. And that overcomes range anxiety, which is something that you would think of someone having when they think they might run out of gasoline, except in this case they could run out of electricity. So we want to make sure that we overcome that by offering electric vehicle charging in as many places as possible. So you can look into this later, but just so you know, Bloomington Normal area actually became an EV-friendly community when the Mitsubishi plant started making electric vehicles. And then the Mitsubishi plant closed. And when the new company got created called Rivian that wanted to make nothing but electric vehicles, they were looking at a lot of different mothballed auto manufacturing plants around the nation, and they chose to open up in Bloomington Normal because Bloomington Normal has over 60 EV charging stations and is promoting this all over the community. And so not only did they have the trained workforce, but they had a community they knew would embrace them. So it's an economic development as well. The advantages of electric vehicles are that they're emission-free, so reducing air pollution is a biggie. And electric vehicles are quiet. They lack exhaust, so they're reducing noise. The price of EVs is falling, and there's used EVs in the marketplace right now that make them even more easier for almost anybody to purchase. People with EVs are considered more likely to shop and attend events and pursue recreational activities where they are able to charge. Big surprise. And becoming an EV-friendly community can actually be done inexpensively. So really simple, they're using that 110 standard outlet. We all have them in our parking garages. That's what's lighting up the lights. So you just put a standard outlet in, mark off that space, and you'll get some folks who are able to charge there. You can also adapt street lights to become charging stations. Now, not all street lights easily adapt. Sometimes you have to dampen the load, but many of them can. For the health department in Will County, we're looking at installing just the standard 110 outlet into street lights, but because we have concerns over it might be misused by some folks, we want to make sure that we can actually lock it down, and we can also track how many people use it that way. So just a simple lockbox, get the key at the reception desk, no biggie. Now, level 2 charging stations. The most inexpensive approach to a level 2 charging station if you were in the retail world would be if you were to go with Volta. Volta actually gives the electricity to people for free and pays for that with advertising on that really pretty screen that you see there. Okay. Then there are also electric vehicle charging stations that are something that you can use a credit card to pay for. The Chicago City Council voted in October to require all new buildings with 24 units or more to have at least 2 electric vehicle charging stations ready. And considering that's relatively new legislation that passed, it's interesting to note that that Illinois legislation under consideration would actually have that not be enough. So again, I would reiterate, more people are going to be adopting this technology. So I mentioned this Volta because it's very exciting. We have one in the Joliet area, and I've seen them in numerous other places. It doesn't require a fee for use. As I mentioned, it would fully charge a car in 3 hours. Where we have it locally, it's actually trying to entice folks to come shop at a grocery store that also allows folks to eat in. So it's seen as something that's getting more people to go to that grocery store. Now, the other stations out there, I have ChargePoint, which has been the most actively purchased by government entities, and then Connect. And that one is something that's being more utilized by multifamily units. So these can be done where they give the electricity away for free, but they can also charge users for the electricity. If you decide to buy the package from ChargePoint, which we are doing at our new health department in Will County, it would run about $1,200 in fees to us in order to take credit cards. That's without the electric cost. If, on the other hand, we decide not to charge users, it would only be $200 just to meter it, see how many cars are using it, how much electricity is being used. So currently what we're doing is we're installing these charging stations with the idea that they will not be charging people to use them. We want to encourage folks to, whether they're visitors to our health department or they're our employees, to actually make use of these things and adopt the EV. I did mention the level 3 charging stations as being very powerful. They differ in as much as that they're taking power and converting it in a faster fashion to the battery, or I should say not converting it, it's DC, so it's staying DC. But in any event, the thing that you need to know is these are actually being installed not just by Tesla, who of course has become famous over the last 8 or 9 years for putting them in, but also by Volkswagen at many Walmarts along highways. We have one along Route 80 in Joliet. And they can be pricey to use. They are pulling a lot more electricity. Or if you own a Tesla, you can use the Tesla ones for free. So there's that. Again, I just have a photo here of Normal, and you can see that they're encouraging it in their retail area for folks to be able to plug in. I did want to mention Keane County started with these a few years ago. They charged for all of them. Now they only charge for the one at the courthouse. They want to encourage more use. And then our 2 colleges, our Joliet Junior College and Lewis University, both also adopted this technology But about a year ago, Lewis University decided to stop charging, and they've seen their 6 plugs go into almost constant use, where Joliet Junior College has told us that they see some folks coming off of Route 80 without a state licenses using them, but they have not been being used by their faculty or their students. So we're not getting many people who want to pay the fees for them. Summary reasons I would add, people with a plug-in at work are more likely to actually purchase a hybrid EV or a full EV. It does show you as a forward planning entity, leadership, worrying about the environment, obviously, and your location gets posted on EV maps that are on all the apps out there, easily found on the DOE's website. So you get some recognition for being there. Maybe you get some more people coming. Employees with EVs are considered more productive. It improves their employee satisfaction. And it's been shown to improve recruiting, especially for younger generation folks who actually are looking at this kind of stuff and they care when they're looking at employment options. Demonstrates concerns for the environment. It makes the community more attractive to businesses as well as home buyers. And I just, for my own personal plug, will tell you that Will County, if you're a government entity in Will County, we have a grant available for level 1 and level 2. So with that, I just want to encourage you to go out and promote level 1 stations in all the existing parking lots. Anybody you know, talk to the businesses that you go to, talk to your government entities, ask them to at least do a level 1. It's extremely inexpensive to offer. Okay, and then if you know anybody in Will County, tell them we have a grant available to them. Thanks.
Thanks, Marta. That was wonderful. We really appreciate that. So again, we're going to be taking questions after Brian presents. And yeah, so let's move on to Brian Urbaszewski, who will be talking more about EVs. Brian, kick it off.
Might be muted, Brian.
All right, just so people know my organization, I work for Respiratory Health Association. We've been around since 1906, and we work to prevent lung disease and promote clean air. We're also part of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which is working to move forward the Clean Energy Jobs Act in Springfield. Big picture to touch on what Marta said. When you look at the sources of carbon dioxide and global warming for the entire country, electricity is about 1/3, and that is what we focused on in trying to reduce fossil fuel use there, coal, natural gas, and promote renewable clean sources. But transportation is another 1/3, and it's one we really haven't tackled that much, especially in Illinois. Transportation electrification is not a new idea. Everything on the left side of the screen is, anywhere from 50 to 100 plus years old. There was a short lull where gasoline sort of took precedence in the market, so did diesel. But after catching up after a few decades with faster, cheaper vehicles, we're starting to see vehicles like school and transit buses, semi-trucks, ferries, locomotives, even airplanes, in addition to cars. And again, to talk about, what is an EV? Marta already covered some of this, but the way I would define it, it's a vehicle with a battery that can operate only on electricity in normal use that you can plug in to charge it. There are vehicles out there that do have engines in them, internal combustion engines that run on gasoline, that still count as EVs. This would be something like the Chevy Volt, or there's a minivan that Chrysler makes too. But those vehicles still have batteries. They have electric motors that can move the vehicle around for some distance, usually anywhere 10, 30, 40 miles before a onboard engine kicks on, which acts as a generator to charge the batteries. But the key point is that just because it has an engine in it doesn't mean it's not an EV that can run solely on electricity. But like Marta said, your typical hybrid out there, can only run on batteries for a short period of time at low speeds, and it can't run at highway speeds on the battery power alone. So when you look at what's out there in Illinois right now, there's not a lot of EVs in the great scheme of things here. A little over 20,000 EVs are registered in Illinois with the Secretary of State right now. That's out of about 4.5 million passenger vehicles. So we're talking at something that's in the range of about, half of 1%. What people might not know is that EVs are not evenly distributed across the country either. Roughly half of all electric vehicles are just found in California. There's over 600,000 of them there. And this has to do with California having stricter automobile standards called what they called Cal LEV standards, or California Low Emission Vehicle Standards, that said that cars that run on gasoline or diesel had to have emit less pollution and had to have better tailpipe pollution controls, which limited the amount of pollution they would put into the air, on top of ratcheting down conventional vehicles pollution. California, about 20 years ago, also put in a provision called the ZEV, or the Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate. And essentially what that means is if you are a car corporation that wants to sell cars in California, you have to sell zero emission vehicles as well, a certain amount of them, or you have to subsidize other companies that are. And so a car market was set up to incentivize the sales of electric cars in that state. That's why we have an EV or an electric vehicle market in the United States. About 10 other states have also adopted this stricter tailpipe and ZEV standard that California has. Unfortunately, Illinois is not one of them. Where's the EV market going to go? Like Marta said, things are getting cheaper, prices are coming down, it's going to increase. Battery prices have come down in the range of 85 to 87% in the last decade or so. They dropped 13% last year. And this is really important because when you build an EV, the biggest single expense in putting that vehicle together is the battery pack that makes it run. So as these prices drop, 85 to 90%, that means those entire vehicles are getting much, much cheaper over time. They think that by about 2024, we're going to hit a level where the battery is so cheap that you're going to compete with traditional internal combustion cars on price. So sticker price to sticker price should even out starting around 2024. Why this huge drop? Just basically improvements in manufacturing, battery chemistry, tighter supply chain control. Companies are just getting better at making batteries. There's not a lot of witchcraft or miracle technologies out there that have created a wonder battery that is, better than anything we've seen before. There's just been a lot of incremental progress and smarter, cheaper ways to produce batteries over time. Talking about sticker price, it's also not necessarily good to think just about the sticker price. You also need to think about the cost of ownership for an EV. Very few people buy a car outright by putting cash on the barrel head. Most people, get a car and they get a 5 to 7 year loan, or they get a long-term lease. And it's basically about how much a month can you afford to spend. So you have your car payment, and then there's everything else: fuel, maintenance, insurance, etc. Now, like what Marta said, an EV can be a lot cheaper to charge than the cost of gas for an internal combustion vehicle. And I did a little calculation here. The numbers are approximate, but to go 100 miles in an EV, you're probably talking somewhere $1, $1.25 in electricity cost. In a conventional car that gets 25 miles per gallon, $2 a gallon, which we're heading towards, about $8. So if you do the math, you save an EV can save you roughly $800, maybe $1,000 a year, and the more you drive, the more you save. There's other savings too. There's often no oil, so you don't need oil changes in an electric car. They don't have radiators in most cases. Transmissions, Martha said the regenerative brakes just mean the brakes last a lot longer. You don't have to change the pads on the brakes nearly as often. So all these things mean that while you are spending money paying for the vehicle, you may be paying a lot less in terms of the other expenses that you have on a monthly basis for a car. So the cost of ownership can be less for an EV, even when the sticker price is more. Cheaper batteries. This has also meant that you can put more batteries into a vehicle and give it a longer range without significantly increasing the cost of the vehicle. So when vehicles came out, about 10 years ago, they would get 70, 80 miles, and that was about it. And they were pretty expensive. But as you can see, the difference between the two model years there on the bottom, the Nissan Leaf, right now you can go about 3 times as far because you have a battery that's much bigger for about the same cost. And I said down there at the bottom, just basing, inflation of what a $33,000 car would cost now compared to 10 years ago, you're talking almost exactly the same price. Again, lots of manufacturers are making these. In 2011, there were only about 10 different models that you could buy. We're getting close to 100 at this point. And again, all the major manufacturers are making them. Not only are they making cars, but you're also starting to see a wide variety of vehicles. You're seeing vans, SUVs, sedans, even pickup trucks. Especially in the last 6 months, there have been several pickups that have been announced that are being manufactured right now or will be by the end of this year. And again, you're seeing ranges, 100 miles, but you're seeing ranges up to 400 miles for some of these vehicles. In addition, you're starting to see more heavy duty, medium and heavy duty vehicles. Big manufacturers of semi-trucks, Freightliner, Volvo, Tesla, are all planning to start manufacturing electric semis either late this year or early next year, things that will go 250 to 500 miles on batteries alone. There's also medium duty trucks like that box truck on the far right. You're also seeing electric transit buses. You're seeing electric school buses. You're even seeing electric delivery vehicles like the Amazon Prime vehicle at the bottom, which actually is going to be built in Illinois in Bloomington Normal. But while all this technology is wonderful, it's still expensive. Any kind of new technology, any kind of new vehicle is expensive. And when we talk about environmental justice or low-income communities, they're a lot less likely to see expensive new vehicle technology. Consequently, they probably won't see a proportional clean air benefit as we start to roll out more EVs into the fleets. And so how do you ensure these changes benefit everybody? So to shift to CEJA and the equity focus, I just wanted to reiterate, car ownership is not an option for everybody. Could be income issues, could be the elderly, those who can't or don't want to drive. And it's particularly challenging in these environmental justice and low-income communities where people don't have, a lot of cash or can't afford a new vehicle. So within CEJA, there's programs to focus on segments where people aren't going to drive or aren't going to own EVs. One is a car sharing program for EVs, which is sort of like a short-term car rental where you can go and rent a car for a short period of time, usually based on hours, that would run on EVs, that will be run under the auspices of the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity at the state level. There is extending the range of transit by getting low-cost, short-distance electric vehicles at the ends of transit lines, so people are able to take transit and not have a barrier of that last half mile or that last mile getting to work. And also a low-income EV rebate to sort of ensure that those with less means can get an EV rebate from the state that would help lower the purchase price of the vehicle and hopefully lower those monthly payments as well. we're also going to do this in a way, well, we're going to promote electric vehicles in Illinois in a way that doesn't make it more expensive to move electricity around. So this is a bit difficult to cover, but you know, wind power happens whenever the wind blows. And sometimes the wind is making electricity at night when there's not a lot of demand. But during the day, that power may be being used. At night, it's not. So you sort of need a sponge to soak up excess electricity when it's produced. In a few years, we're probably going to have more solar power as well, and we may get more power in the middle of the day than we actually need, and that will have to be offloaded too. So, you know, we're going to enter a world where, you know, you're going to charge electric vehicles, but you're going to try and incentivize the charging to occur when there's a lot of extra electricity that's coming onto the grid that can't really go anywhere else. Doing that and managing how the electricity flows occur is cheaper than adding extra wires, poles, and transformers to the electric grid to move greater amounts of renewable energy throughout the system. So it's an economic way to do it. This is just an example. During the middle of the day, we may get more solar power than we actually need. That power above the blue line in the middle of the day is going to have to be shunted into electric vehicles to keep costs down for everybody. So as part of this, there'll be incentives to encourage people to look at you know, when electricity is cheap and when it's expensive. This can be done like an hourly pricing rate. It can be done as a time of use rate. So basically, rather than looking at every hour saying, you know, after 7 o'clock at night, electricity prices are going to be cheap, and that's when you should be charging your vehicles. There's also the potential to use school buses as giant battery packs for the grid during the summertime, because there's not a lot of demand for school buses during the peak summer months when we need air conditioning electricity. And they can take a lot of that solar power in the day and let it back onto the grid at after dusk and into the night. One of the things we're going to do is also to try and reduce the amount of diesel exhaust exposure and subsidize electric vehicles to replace vehicles that are now run on diesel. Big push would be for electrifying transit vehicles like buses, paying for the vehicles and paying for the infrastructure needed to charge those vehicles. The legislation also would subsidize the cost of charging for other public vehicles and public serving vehicles. So everything from garbage trucks that might be owned by a municipality to school buses that may be owned by a private company, but may be providing a valuable service in you know, transferring students from their homes to the schools. But all these funds that are going to be used to encourage transitions to electrification is going to require that the recipients also participate in these beneficial electrification programs that ensure that they're using electricity at times when we need people to be taking electricity off the grid and putting it into vehicles. Then there's going to be CEJA everything else. So this will be an effort to create $500 rebates for charging equipment for retail customers if they participate in a beneficial charging program. So your average person could get a rebate to install an electric car charger in their own garage, but as part of that rebate, they would have to participate in this program, which again, encourages them to take electricity off the grid at times when there's too much of it on the grid and we need to store it somewhere, i.e. their vehicles. The legislation will also require that about 1,000 level 2 charging stations will be built per year, and about 200 quick charge stations, which would be mostly targeted towards rural areas and along major interstate corridors to facilitate long distance travel. The heavy duty program and what's on this slide here are both going to be directly administered by utilities. So the utilities will be responsible for doing this. The numbers here are for ComEd territory, the 1,000 and 200. Ameren will be slightly less because they have fewer customers in Illinois. I think this is the last slide. Again, utilities have to make this happen, and they're going to have to do workshops, education, and get the word out to the public to make sure that people take advantage of this, that companies take advantage of it, agencies take advantage of it, and that they are able to make the investments they need to make on the ground to make progress towards what we want to see over the next 10 years. They're going to have to file with the ICC and how they're going to do this and keep it on track over time. I think that might be it. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Marta. That was really informative, and we appreciate your time and sitting down with all of us to explain all of that. I know I learned a lot, and I think a lot of our attendees did too. So I've been recording questions throughout the webinar, and I'll try to keep reading them as they come in at the end here. But I'll start off with a question somebody had about adoption rates across the state. People were asking, what are some of the ways to boost the adoption rates, and how do we address, issues of availability of EVs in certain markets, maybe even rural markets. I know that CEJA is one tool that you were talking about, Brian, but maybe you both can discuss how us as consumers or how us as advocates can boost adoption.
Wow. Well, there's a couple things. We tried to get the state to adopt California car standards, which would have required a lot more EVs to show up here, because if any car company wanted to sell cars in Illinois, they would have had to make minimum sales numbers for EVs. Again, that's what's driving it in California and now Colorado and a lot of East Coast states. For legal reasons that are a little bit beyond me, we're kind of in a holding pattern right now because of some stuff President Trump did that is attempting to repeal California's ability to actually set up that kind of program. And I think kind of until the legal dust settles there, we don't have that option to opt into being basically an electric vehicle promotion state. So there we are. What we can do is, people can still search out cars. There's places like, Carvana, where they will actually, ship cars from other places. And honestly, I think a lot of cars coming into Illinois are being, shipped from other places. Tesla has a direct marketing strategy as well. So you can buy directly from the manufacturer. We're working to try and set some incentive, like the incentives in CEJA, to try and get to lower the cost and to lower the barriers and have more people consider and look at the long-term benefits of EVs by having those kinds of rebates. So it's kind of a smattering of what we would say low budget approaches. I mean, it'd be great to have a mandate, but that's not going to happen. So we're using all the tools we can right now.
Absolutely.
If I could just add that this is also a chicken and an egg kind of question, because which came first? And if you build it, I really do believe it will come. That's the studies have indicated. When a business puts this available to their employees, the employees go out and seek this kind of technology. But you do have to overcome the fear. Think about the days when people had horse-drawn carriages and the first cars came out and they could feed the horse with hay and grass. Where were they going to get gasoline, or where were they going to plug in the first electric vehicles? we're at that same stage right now. We need the infrastructure, and that's part of the reason why we're saying, level 1 overcomes that. If most people will be driving these things, charging at home, they just need assurances that, hey, after work, they want to go and run a few errands. Maybe they want to visit relatives that are a distance away, and they want that extra boost. And why not give it to them? And then, of course, getting companies to see the value of switching their own fleets over and how much money and they can save, which, you did a fantastic job of pointing out all the different things they don't have to pay for in the way of maintenance. So, thanks.
One other thing to add on what, following up on what Marta said, it is a chicken and egg problem, and while a lot of people have a garage where they can plug in a electric car in a 110 outlet and it's easy, that's what I do. A lot of people rent, a lot of people are in condos and they have to park in garages if they own a car, and it's been a big barrier to a lot of people, especially younger, more progressive people with disposable income, that they want to do the right thing and they can't because it's just not made available by the building they live in or by their offices. And Chicago actually just this past week passed a improved version of the ordinance that you were talking about. It passed committee. It has not gone to full city council yet. It was supposed to go on Wednesday, but they canceled everything because of the coronavirus. But it requires 20% of parking spaces in new multi-unit residential buildings, and 20% of parking spaces in non-residential properties where I think it's more than 30 spaces in the parking lot have to be electrified. So that's going to, I think, move things when the city council gets back and votes on this. It's being supported by the mayor now. That'll be a pretty big jump, and I think it'll help lead not only in Chicago but throughout the region and throughout Illinois.
That's great. And before we move on from this topic, a few other people had some related questions to adoption and the use of EVs in certain areas. So, what are the opportunities for public-private partnerships in this space? And along with that question, what are the grants that are available for, let's say, a local public library or a public school that they can use to get some of this infrastructure built and improve adoption rates? Because a lot of these areas, especially schools in low-income disenfranchised communities, are facing these major EJ concerns with the emissions of cars and light-duty and even heavy-duty industrial freight going through their communities. How can they start to find the grants and the resources to build out this infrastructure?
You want to take it, Marta?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can tell you there's not a lot of grants right now. There used to be, and we're hoping to get more. So right now, our county grant is one of the few and it is open to libraries and school districts and townships and municipalities, parks, the forest reserve, all of them right now. We did not open it up to the private sector. And this is the first time that we're offering it. We want to see what the demand is, and then we'll look at future funding. But I would also say that when you reach out to the EV station folks that would install these, they are also well aware of any grant opportunities that may have existed or are existing. And so they probably have better information than I do at the moment. But yeah, the last search, we're installing them now, there wasn't anything available to us.
Mm-hmm.
I could just add on to that. There's a couple different sources out there, but they're not all available to the public, and they're not all available yet. Again, CEJA, we want to get that passed because that would require utilities to spend a lot of money putting these in, especially for people who don't have the ability to charge at home. Most people who drive an EV charge at home 90+% of the time, but if you're in an apartment or you're in a condo, you need publicly available charging stations. And so hopefully that will generate a lot of investment throughout the entire region. On top of that, what's available right now already is Volkswagen cheated and produced cars that pollute too much. They got caught, and there was a big settlement, and Illinois got a big cut of that and is still sitting on between 80 and $90 million of that right now. And numerous groups have urged the governor to program that money towards electrification and increasing the amount of it for EVs and for charging infrastructure. There's also the state capital plan that was passed last spring, has $70 million allocated in it for EV infrastructure. So for charging equipment and installation. That hasn't been touched yet, and it's unclear how it's going to be spent and where it's going to be spent and when it's going to be spent. So there is funding out there yet, but it's not yet coordinated from the top as to how this is all going to roll out, when and where.
Got it. Thank you both. I'm getting a couple questions right now about CEJA and the major legislation that would provide the framework for the EV infrastructure and for beneficial electrification across the state. And people are asking what the status of CEJA is and how we can be the best advocates in getting it passed this session. And I'll jump in here just for a moment. I think we're all asking that question, right? Because this is an unprecedented, once in a generation event that has thrown things in turmoil. And many of the governor's committee sessions on the bill have been canceled. The legislature itself wasn't in session last week. And yeah, we have a lot of barriers to this. And I think that to be the best advocates we can be, I think it's just continuous outreach to our representatives to make sure that they know that we are still invested. And I know this is a very difficult time, and a lot of people's priorities are not on CEJA or on this topic. So it puts us in a precarious position. But I think that once things die down and we get to reprioritize what's important in Illinois, our legislators will come back to the idea that passing CEJA is a great idea. And I know that they still are thinking that, and we just need to keep telling them that that's the case. I know we only have a few minutes, so I want to keep moving past this. So somebody was asking a really important question about the standardization of charging. And this is a big issue. I know we have the Tesla chargers, we have the level 1 chargers, level 2 of different brands. What is going on with standardization, and what are the barriers to providing a standard for all EVs, and what's that impact on the market itself?
You want to try, Marta?
I can start. I was just going to say, my knowledge is that Tesla is the only one that has their own technology. Everybody else is conforming. Now, I could be wrong, but that's everything that I've read. And Teslas can plug in to the other technology. They have an adapter that comes with the vehicle, so they can virtually charge wherever they go. But if you were to go to a Tesla-only site, you would not be able to charge if you did not have a Tesla. So that is my understanding on it.
Yeah, I think it depends on how fast you want to charge. A level 1 or level 2, I think for the most part they're using the same socket or the same dispenser or plug. But when you get to the level 3, the really high-powered quick charger stations, there it gets a little more complicated. Nissan, I think, uses what they call a CHAdeMO charger attachment, whereas Chevy for the Bolt and some other companies, I think BMW, use what's called a CCS. And then you have Tesla with their supercharger network. So if you want to charge slow, it's usually not that complicated. If you want to charge fast, there's still not consistency out there on one type of plug for those vehicles.
Got it. No, thank you. That's really helpful. So moving on from some of the technical aspects of EVs and beneficial electrification, some people are asking about the sourcing of the actual electricity for EVs and what the benefit is to promoting the expansion of EV adoption rates and the infrastructure if so much of our energy is procured from coal-fired power plants, natural gas plants, and asking about what the incentives are right now, or what incentives need to exist in order to make sure that we're using electricity that is carbon-free.
Okay. Let me tackle that. let me tackle that. The way I like to think of it is this way. You have to step back and look at the big picture. And when you get a conventional vehicle, something that runs on gasoline, the cleanest day it'll ever operate is the day you drive it off the lot. After that, things start to wear out, your pollution controls start to erode, the engine starts to wear out, and becomes more polluting and less efficient over time. The opposite is true with an electric vehicle. It gets cleaner over time. And that's because you have to look at, like, where's your fuel coming from? Well, your fuel is coming from the grid. And as we retire coal plants and we prevent new natural gas plants from being built, and we build more wind and solar onto the grid, over time, the grid itself is getting cleaner. And so the fuel going into an electric vehicle every month, every year going forward gets cleaner. So you're using that vehicle sort of as a force for good, and it's only going to get better over time. Obviously, you have to change the grid, and that's why what's going on with CEJA is so important, and trying to get to a decarbonized grid by 2030, where we get rid of all the coal and natural gas plants, should do a large part towards solving both of these problems. But electric vehicles also provide a valuable shock absorber on the system, because right now they turn coal plants on and natural gas plants on when they need the power, and they shut them off when they don't need the power. They can ramp them up and down. You can't do that with solar power and wind power. When the sun shines, you're going to make electricity. When the wind blows, you're going to make electricity. And therefore, it becomes a game of catching what you can and putting it where you can store it. And that is in the batteries of electric vehicles.
Great. Marta, anything there?
Oh, no, I think you covered that. That was great.
Okay, great. So we only have a few minutes left. So let's ask about the larger picture. I think that it's important to understand what the national context is for a lot of EVs and a lot of the topics. What is the federal government doing to either hinder or help promote the EV market? And I know this is a softball question, and I want you both to take it away and provide us like a final closing sentiment around what the landscape looks like. But it is important for everybody to know where we're at right now and why we're here.
We used to have a lot of incentives from the Department of Energy for the former administration.
Yeah. I think that's a kind of it in a nutshell there. The current administration is not that excited about electrification. They seem to like the oil industry a lot more. But at the same time, again, pulling back and looking at what's going on worldwide. I mean, electrification is not just a thing that's going on in the United States. They're looking at it, and they're accelerating it faster in Europe than they are here. In China, it's going by leaps and bounds ahead of us. We're actually kind of a laggard internationally, in terms of major nations. But other countries and businesses have increasingly looked at the cost-benefit ratio as the prices of the vehicles come down, and the fact that they cost very little to charge compared to using fossil fuels, and that there's a lot less maintenance on these vehicles, means you can make a lot more money off of them. The freight industry is really interested in electric trucks for that very reason. So I think, in a way, the technology is succeeding to a certain extent, despite the lack of support and active resistance by some federal government policies. And I think it can only get better, perhaps next year.
Great.
If I could add that on a positive note, just following along that exact same line, Amazon, which we all know is just going ballistic right now with their providing necessities to folks, is trying to electrify their fleet. They are adding solar to their facilities. So there's industry, influential industry out there is going to push this forward, hopefully.
And just again, to follow up on that, thanks for teeing that up, Marta, that the Rivian plant in Normal, Illinois, which is making electric pickup trucks starting this year, and they're going to make an electric SUV starting next year, Amazon sunk $700 million into Rivian about a year ago. And that deal was to ensure that Rivian would produce 100,000 Amazon electric delivery vans. I think it's over the next 10 years, but they're going to start producing those, I think, by 2022. But there are going to be a lot of jobs, and there's going to be a lot of investment in Illinois to produce electric vehicles. And it's because companies like Amazon see the writing on the wall and that there are long-term cost savings for them to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave this conversation off. I think it's really exciting that there is so much going on at the state level in Illinois that is helping to bolster the EV market when we know that adoption is incoming right now and ongoing. It's great that Rivian is doing this, and I think that we are one of the leaders, at least in the Midwest, in the world of EVs. And that was a really great, informative presentation from both of you, Marta and Brian. So thank you both for taking the time to talk us through everything. And as a final closing remark, just wanted to clarify the comment I made before about CEJA outreach right now. And thank you to Nisha, who is a wonderful IEC employee as well. She works really closely with me. Thank you for calling us out. It's important to note that the response to the virus is by far the most important thing going on right now. And in terms of outreach to legislatures and whatnot, it is most important to say that we're supporting the virus response more than anything. And that is the key thing. People's lives are literally on the line, and there is so much work to do to protect the people that will be impacted disproportionately in this time, especially those with pre-existing conditions like respiratory health issues in environmental justice communities. So those people are on our minds, and I wanted to clarify that is the priority right now. So again, thank you all for joining us today. This was a wonderful and illuminating conversation, and we'd love to keep this conversation going. If anybody would like to email me personally to talk more about this, my email is G and then TAVES @illenviro.org. I'll write it in the chat box. And yeah, we just want to thank everyone again, and have a wonderful day, and stay safe and stay healthy, please.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks all.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.